is allow yourself. See, at the moment, what's happening is it's sort of like you feel afraid, but you're not tolerating it on any level at all at this stage. And that's what I observe most people doing. They're not tolerating the emotion of fear at all. They feel it, and then instantly they're doing something to avoid it. Instantly. It's just like without any thought or even a desire to even sit there and feel the emotion of fear. It's just almost instant, bang, they're off doing something else. And what I'm suggesting to you is, as soon as you feel it and you notice yourself go to do something else, stop, come back, allow yourself to remember what you were remembering at the time, allow yourself to feel what you're feeling at the time, and then sit with the feeling for as long as you can, right? And my suggestion is to sit with it, like I've had to sit with mine for, like before I started feeling it, I sat with the feeling of fear for 4 to 6 hours every day, probably for quite some time. And when I say quite some time, it's probably about 9 months or 8 months for me. And then I had the breakthroughs into feeling it, actually feeling it. And that lasted me, for me, it was 3.5 months that lasted. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering that before it, like I think when I think about it, I'll be just sitting there going, okay, well, is that just continued?
What I did was I purposely went to my bed, laid down, and just breathed very, very deeply and allowed myself to think about what it was that I was terrified of. And I just kept diaphragmatically breathing. Okay. And and eventually there would be a lot of pain in my body start coming up, because pain is caused by the repulsion of fear. So you're there, you're feeling the repulsion of fear in that moment, and so there's a lot of pain in your body, so you have to be able to learn to tolerate quite extreme amounts of pain sometimes. And I used to lay there like that every day. There's very few days that I didn't do it for 8 to 9 months. Where I just laid like that for 3 or 4. Now, I had a lot of fear, of course, 'cause I've been tortured 3 or 4 times, and my death was torture as well. So, where you haven't had that, so, obviously it will be shorter. If you're sincere about doing it, it'll be much shorter. But the key is to lay there with that feeling and breathe, and create the environment to do it. What I see a lot of people doing is they create a very busy environment around them, which actually helps detune you from your fear. So it's not creating a soul space to feel your fear. So my suggestion is to allow yourself to settle with the feeling. And for me, it was like lying on my bed, breathing deeply for, like I said, 4 to 6 hours sometimes a day. What I used to do sometimes is I used to get up straight away in the morning, as soon as it was daybreak, 6 o'clock or whatever. I used to have something, usually some fruit, something light to eat. I'd go for a run just to get my body moving and body functioning, a bike ride, run, or do some exercise of some kind for half an hour or more, and just to get all the blood pumping and everything. I'd come back, have a shower, and then I'd lay on the bed, just breathing for hours at a time. Yeah, and what that did was it helped me it allowed me to be more sensitive to my pain and the relationship between my pain and my fear. It also allowed me to feel the sensation of fear in my body and get used to feeling that sensation of fear. And eventually it got to the point where I had these quite large experiences which lasted, again, 4 to 6 hours, but they were quite intense experiences, where my whole body would go into cramping and lock up and everything. And that would last usually anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. And a few times I passed out. I lost consciousness during that phase, because I stopped. My body would stop breathing as well, and eventually what would happen there is I'd stop breathing, and stop breathing for long enough to pass out. And obviously your body eventually breathes. As soon as you pass out, you start breathing again. But
because I've had moments and where I am locking up, but then I freak out thinking, is it
what's
spirits
going
or
on?
what's going on? And
yeah,
then I'm
most
like,
people will freak out then, you know.
Because if I passed out, I'd be like, holy crap,
Yeah. No, it was a bit stressful the first time. After a while, I got used to it. And what I found after that was that I would sleep often for 24 hours once I started. So I'd have this fear. The only thing I can describe it as is a fear fit sort of thing. Where I'd have a fear fit. It'd last from anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. And at start, 6 hours, but it was like cramp for 6 hours. So it was pretty intense. And then after that happened, I would pass out generally. And then I'd wake up, the first time, 36 hours later. Second time was about 24 hours later. And then sort of reduced down until 3.5 months of that. And I probably was 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Where it'd just be intense for 5 minutes. I wouldn't pass out. The very first few times I passed out, but after that I didn't pass out. But I would sleep a lot afterwards, and my body would feel really relaxed, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'd wake up going, oh, I feel so good. It's like, you know, you really notice it. Yeah, so that's what happened to me. But don't be too afraid, because that's pretty intense, and I don't think there'd be too many people on earth who will have to go through that. But once you go through that, it was sort of like I'd go through that. You know, the first few weeks was a bit intense, as you can imagine, and then it slowly lessened in time period and time frame, and after a month or so, they'd last an hour or less. And then after a few months, they'd last, 15 minutes. And then 3 months, it was 5 minutes. And then after 3.5 months, I didn't have them anymore. And after I had that experience, which happened, 17 or so years ago now, I think it was about that, 17 years ago or so. And once I had that experience, my feeling about fear was totally different after that, like totally different. I was not afraid of the same things I was afraid of anymore. Even if I was afraid, I never acted upon it, and never chose to do things in it, never lived by it after that. Yeah, just completely different. Life was completely different. And I remember after that was when the very first time I remember waking up without dread. I used to, every day of my life until then, I used to wake up feeling dread. Like every day I'd be worried that something really bad was going to happen today. Yeah. And after I dealt with my fear, that all had gone as well. So I woke up feeling happy and refreshed, not feeling like terrified and afraid and like something dreadful was going to occur.
So is that then different to this global?
No, that was what I was feeling.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. My mind was pretty big, obviously, because of the different events that have happened in my life and so forth. But the average person on earth, won't have it that intensely, I feel, and in fact probably have just a small portion of that. Yeah, but it was an intense experience. But after I'd gone through it, I knew I had to go through it before I began to go through it. But after I went through it, it was like, I'm so happy I've gone through that. You know what I mean? And everything after that changed quite significantly in my life, actually. Very significantly in my life, things changed after that. And that was before I even had any inkling to or desire to reconnect with God as well. So that happened without sort of God being present, if you like, in my life. So I felt very alone going through it, and nobody really understood it. There was only 2 or 3 occasions where people saw me going through it, and in each occasion, they called the hospital and had me taken to hospital. So I learnt very quickly not to bother anybody else with it. Two occasions were way before then. And only one occasion when I was doing it properly that somebody noticed and decided to do something about it. Because people stress out about it, right? Yeah. So that was a bit of a problem. So basically I learnt to do it by myself with no one around after that. and that was always better as well, because then I didn't have to bear their projections and their fear and it was hard enough dealing with your own fear than dealing with the projections of fear from other people who are worried about your health or whatever. And so, but what happened for me was I had these kind of experiences of quite a few times through my life before I chose to actually address them. And I had 5 of these events in my life. The very first one was when I was 17, and that's what. And by the time I was 33, which is was about 36 or 35 when I dealt with these things. By the time I was 33, I knew I was going to have to deal with it, because I'd have 5 of the events up to then, and some of the events were quite intense, where I would stop breathing, and I was with other people, and they would rush me to hospital, of course, and then the doctors would put me in scanners and all the things they do, right? And they put you in all these things, and you come out with a clean bill of health, and they've got no idea what's going on, right? And so they had no idea what was happening at all. Each time, and after the first 2 times, the first time I got a house call from a doctor, my mother triggered all that because of her fear, and then the second time it happened, I was with a guy and we were travelling on the road actually, and it happened, and they took me to hospital. They couldn't find anything wrong, and when I went home I slept for about 30 hours or so. That was the second time. I was 27 then. And then I had 2 or 3 more occasions, but I didn't tell anybody after that because it was too much trouble trying to explain it all to everybody. I just sort of accepted it as a part of my life. And then when I was 35, I realised, this is fear, and I need to deal with it, and I need to process it properly. And the best way to do that is the body. Like by then, I started to trust the body. How the body works and moves, and by then I started to trust that emotions could be released and those kind of things. So that's what I chose to do. And looking back on it now, I'm so glad that nobody interfered with me doing it, because if somebody had interfered with it, it would have taken much longer to address. Yeah. So that was my experience. But as I'm saying, that's not going to be the average person's experience. But you will have moments where your whole body locks up like a cramp, and and the key is to breathe. To breathe through the whole process, allow the breathing to, allow your body to feel what it's feeling, and it's a part of the experience of terror, and then you'll probably find afterwards that you'll need a good rest, So yeah.
So it's just trusting in your body as well to let it do what it needs to do.
Yeah.